Welcome back to our show. I'm joined once again by Jamestown Sun reporter Keith Norman. And I'd like to welcome Roy Musland, who is the former president of the Jamestown School Board. Mr. Musland, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here, thank you.
And Nellie Deegan, a longtime community activist in the area who works with the Jamestown Public Schools in the area of education and everything. Mr. Musland, the North Dakota legislature passed a bill requiring school districts to implement anti-bullying policies by July 2012. Your board has already enacted such a policy. Can you tell us what prompted this action, and is bullying a problem area here in Jamestown?
We were trying to be proactive, Matt. I mean, I think bullying is everywhere. It's at school, it's in the workplace, it's a fact of life. And there were some community people came and expressed some concerns at our board meetings. And in order to be proactive and to deal with the problem of bullying, we decided we needed a policy for our administrators, teachers, and school officials to follow when there was bullying. So we knew the legislature was going to be acting on it, but we wanted to be proactive and get something in place.
Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of issues does your bullying policy address? What kind of measures does it enact to ensure bullying doesn't occur?
First off, we want bullying to be reported if there is bullying, not to be silent on it. And if a teacher sees it, another student, it's to report it to somebody. And then we have a written complaint form that a person can fill out, and it covers a wide range of physical violence, cyber stalking, there's a lot of stuff with technology now, intimidation, threats, anything like that. It covers a full gamut of bullying.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ms. Deegan, what is your opinion about Jamestown School Board's bullying policy?
Oh, I think it's a positive. I mean, anytime you make, we can't function without accountability. And that is being proactive, and the board is doing such a good job about that, it's going to help everyone. It's going to help the students, it's going to help the parents, it's going to help the faculty. And the more people are aware of being involved, being proactive, and understanding the law and how to implement it and accountability, it's going to be an easier transition for everyone. So it's good. Now, any law that we put in place is accountability, but we also have to understand where we're going with it as well. So that's good.
Nellie mentioned the parents in all of this. Are the parents a part of the policy, either as a responsible party or an authority figure in this? Or
we're going to try to educate everybody at the beginning of the school year. There will be information in the student handbook, in the employee handbook, and whenever we can get the word out about bullying, it'll be on our school website. We're going to attend functions like this that hopefully the newspaper will cover. And so yes, we want to raise the awareness and educate people on bullying, and basically we're here to try to minimize it. I think it'll be hard to ever completely eliminate it, but in my opinion the goal should be zero.
Now, we were talking earlier about sexting, this sending of sexually explicit messages or pictures by cell phone, which in the case of adults isn't always illegal. In fact, in 2009, an American Association of Retired Persons report approved of sexting for adults. Also, pornography is readily available on the internet regardless of the content controls placed on it. Ms. Deegan, do you think kids with sexting are just acting out what they see in the broader American culture?
Well, we live in a fast world, and it's like so fast sometimes you can't catch up with it. But for example, we have that Parent Awareness Prevention Center that's housed in the school district. There's a lot of things that parents can know what the warning signs are and how to diffuse it. And my understanding that if you understand how to work with that computer or that texting or a photo, there's a lot of things that you can put blocks on, just like television. So again, it's educating parents and even students of the accountability of it. So it's something that's all over the United States. It's not just in one location.
Right. Now, the North Dakota State Legislature recently passed legislation mandating that public schools include in their health education curriculum discussion on the benefits of abstinence in sexual activities. prior to marriage. What do you think prompted the legislature to take up this issue, given that many schools already include abstinence education in their curriculum? And was this bill really necessary, Mr. Musland?
I think there's certain groups out there that probably lean towards abstinence as the #1 method of, like birth control. I'm of the opinion that, there is going to be sex education. Hopefully it's going to start at home. Hopefully there's going to be a church involved, and then the school will be able to complement the education that the students receive at home and in their churches. I'd rather have sex education taught by a professional in a school setting, teaching it with respect, human dignity, rather than out in a school parking lot or somewhere else in the community. So I think there will be sex education. It's just, how do we do it? Do we want to have some control or some say in it? And personally, I think we should. And abstinence, definitely a part of sex education.
Ms. Deegan, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's important to educate young people on, again, accountability and how it affects their health, what it leads to. But it's also with the parent involvement, and it'll follow you all the way through school. So the more education we have on this, the more successful we can be. And it's been proven statistically that the more parents are involved with their children, the more success they have. And in this area, there's some states that have a higher risk of young pregnancies versus others. So,
now, talking with the health teacher at Jamestown High School, he said they already teach abstinence education in their sex education program. And reading an article in the Fargo Forum, they say most of the same things, that West Fargo already has abstinence education in place. Is this bill kind of redundant in the way that it just tells people to teach what's already being taught?
I don't think we want to get in a real vigorous debate on if it's redundant. Possibly it is, but I'm not going to sit here and say that that it's bad. I think anytime we educate people, raise awareness, it's a good thing. And I really want to thank Nellie Deegan and compliment her on this parent center she's helping to implement, because getting parents involved, grandparents, other people. And if I can just share with you, Matthew, and the rest of you here, just this week I had a mother in my office and earlier you had referred to texting and Facebooking, stuff like that. And she had a situation where there was a person on Facebook had actually asked her daughter and quite a few other girls in Jamestown, the way it sounded, to send pictures to this person. Her daughter had made the mistake of doing it. Then the person comes back and says, "Now send me more. I'm going to put it on the internet or on Facebook." And so she was very concerned and wanted to raise the awareness. When I see things, hear things like that, it really concerns me, because I think there's been some real positive things with the internet and Facebook. There's definitely positive things, but there are some negative things too. There are some bad people out there. There's predators, people that do bad things on the internet or on Facebook. And educating, again, the students, the parents. I think parents should be involved, like Nellie says, with their children. Know what their passwords are on their computers, maybe checking their phone records once in a while, just to see, because sometimes young people, they don't always make the most informed decisions, and they are young, they're learning. So we're here to help. And again, I'm just really thankful to Nellie for this parent center that her and others are implementing.
Now, Ms. Deegan, do you see any connection between the manner of sex education being taught and the rise of sexting by teens on their cell phones, which can lead actually to an increase in bullying incidents? Or are the two issues completely separate?
Well, I think they're kind of hand in hand now because of the technology. But again, it's something that we can have control over. Even students, it's surprising when you work with students and you are proactive. Students really basically want guidance. And parents sometimes, when they go, well, everybody's doing it. This is a cliche you hear all the time. But those same students, sometimes when we say, okay, these are the lines we don't cross, then they take a deep breath and they say, well, okay, I'm not going to do that, because I'm not going to cross that line, because somebody cares enough to tell me this is not acceptable. So the texting I mean, there's always been issues throughout time, but I did a 5-year study on human behavior many years ago, and I asked individuals of all ages if you could change something in your life, and they said, all of them, one thing I asked, they said, I wish I would have listened to my parents. So, you know, that parent involvement is very critical. So if we have role models in our community and they're coming forward to help students, you can't lose, and neither will the students, because they know enough people care and they won't cross the line. They just want to have a guidance. And that's, you know, and this is good because, you know, they're vulnerable. If they're going to be entrapped in a negative element, kids are vulnerable. I mean, until you get an age, and just think of adults, sometimes they become vulnerable too. So young people, we have to take that in consideration. They're very vulnerable and we need to help them and protect them.
Now sometimes children don't always listen to their parents, of course. One particular case is in Oregon where 2 boys and 1 girl were accused of sending sexually explicit photos of minors by text message. And in Oregon, sending sexually explicit images of minors is not only against the law, but it can result in a felony charge of encouraging sex abuse or using a child in display of explicit sexual content. Children can actually go to jail for sending these images, for basically displaying child pornography if they are convicted of them. Do you think that such penalties may be too steep for minors who may not know what they're doing, Ms. Deegan?
Well, just think about this. If we have a law and you don't understand the law and you break the law, then the accountability is going to be worse. So when we educate ourselves in the law, what does that mean? How it's going to be disciplined? Who's involved? I mean, at a local level, at a state level, at law enforcement. I mean, the more knowledge we acquire, the more accountability. And a lot of times people just think, or students think, oh, that'll never happen to me. That can't happen to me. Or that's not really that serious. This is okay. Or this is a dare. Well, a dare can get you in a lot of trouble. So we have to educate everyone on being proactive and say, okay, this is a law now. Wherever you live, in whatever state, if there's a law implemented, then we have to understand that law. And then you can help those that are out there. You know, even parents, they might not even know that that we might have this law. Just think about how many parents, you read about it in the paper, but did it pass, did it not pass? Is it really there? And what does it mean? And even with students, what does it mean? So we need to educate everybody on that aspect of it.
Now, Mr. Musland, besides education, though, what kind of penalties should be assessed to kids when they do cross the line and they do send a sex image?
That's a good question, Matthew. You know, I don't think we want to start sending grade school kids to prison, but I'm a firm believer in keeping kids busy. You know, I grew up on a farm, picking rocks, hauling hay, just doing physical work, and then went to school, played basketball, ran track. I mean, I think parents, school officials, we need to keep these kids busy in positive situations. Keep them busy doing things that are fruitful to society and to make things better, and to just educate them. And so, I mean, that's a tough question you raised there. I mean, you don't want to start making criminals out of them, but they need to be aware of what's proper and what's not proper and what the consequences are.
Now, you guys have talked a lot about education, but going forward, what are some things a parent should really take into account, or maybe a teacher should take into account to help educate children about sexting and the problems that occur from it? Ms. Deegan?
Well, that's why we have that Parent Awareness Prevention Center. And we're doing a study right now, so come, let's say, when the kids go back to school, we'll be reporting our study to the board and their recommendations and what type of concerns they have and their solutions. You'd be surprised when you get a group of community people and they have such great ideas. One of the things is that if you have a situation, you know, you need to understand it.
Well,
and this is one of the things.
Ms. Deegan. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but Mr. Musland, Ms. Deegan, thank you for joining us. When we come back, Keith and I will try to dissect what we've learned today after these words. Welcome back to Night Watch. Keith, tonight's show exposed a topic that often hits a raw nerve in school districts around the country, and it's no different here in Jamestown. What do you think?
What I learned tonight, or what I saw tonight, was the importance of parents in all of this. All of our experts tonight talked about how the parent is going to have to play a big part in bullying, sexting, any of those type of topics. That the school can reinforce behavior and in some cases enforce behavior, but it's still the parent that's got to set the standard.
Now, one of the things that stood out to me when I was researching these topics, both bullying and sexting, was the prevalence and attention these are getting in our media and everything today. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but growing up, I don't remember they're getting quite the same level of attention in the media. Am I just too young to really remember what went on, or do you think Americans are starting to sit up and take notice of these issues?
I think the technology has changed a lot, even certainly since I was young and even since you were young. The technology has changed so much. It moves so much faster, and it is so much more permanent. State's Attorney Fritz Fremgen talked about once something is out there on the internet, it is probably on some computer server somewhere pretty much for the foreseeable future. And that was not the case 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or in my case 40 years ago and 50 years ago. And that makes a big difference with this type of case, with this type of situation.
Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the Jamestown School Board passed an anti-bullying policy in February. What kinds of things did the policy address? I mean, obviously it was before North Dakota, the legislature passed their bullying law.
My understanding is based on policies developed at some larger schools out of state that the school board members felt addressed the situation adequately. It deals a lot with, and this is my understanding again of the situation, deals a lot with reporting and responding to the situation. I think the reality is they can't stop everything, but they can respond to it and they can keep it from becoming a repeated behavior. And I think that's a lot of the goal of it in the policy they're putting forward.
Now, is bullying and even sexting a big focus for the Jamestown School Board? Or?
I think it is. I think it has been for the past year. I think it's a part of their daily program and operation up there. The school, about a year ago, added a school resource officer, which is a police officer that has an office in the school next to the library. And a lot of what he deals with is those type of situations. So I think it's a major focus for them.
Now, what kind of things does the policy, I mean, Mr. Musland talked a little bit about education, but what do they do with kids? Are there disciplinary actions in the school itself?
I don't know the exact steps that it takes, but it starts with education and it ends with discipline.
Okay.
And that's pretty much how I think you try to address most any crime or behavior that is outside the normal.
Now, Michelle Obama has worked extensively to combat bullying and raise awareness. Coupled with that, in many school districts or states, like North Dakota and Jamestown, either are or already have passed some type of anti-bullying legislation or policy. How much of an impact do you think all these efforts are having?
That again goes back to what I said at first. It's the parents that are going to have the greatest impact. The schools can monitor, the schools can try to enforce, but without the cooperation of the parents, without the efforts of the parents in these issues, their effect is going to be unfortunately kind of minimal, or minimal from what it could be if they had the full cooperation and the full effort of the parents.
Now, sexual images, turning a little bit to sexting, sexual images are all over our society, and like I mentioned before, sexting is even condoned in some media outlets, music videos, movies, etc. How much do you think sexting results from deviant behavior from young people, and how much do you think it results from their reflecting the broader culture?
It reflects the broader culture in that we have that newer technology available now that can put a lot of those images on a phone, on a computer screen, on an iPad, and moves it that much faster and moves it that much easier to anybody who has the technology and the know-how to look for it. And right now, that's the younger generation. So they are primed to find those things if they're intent to look for them.
Now, there's some focus by the Jamestown School Board on bullying. Obviously, I mentioned their policy. But has the board really looked at sexting and enacting some kind of combative measure against it?
In my understanding, that is part of their bullying policy.
Okay.
And I don't know how the details of that work, but I believe it is part of their bullying policy.
Now, have there been any recent local incidences involving sexting or any criminal charges resulting from it?
Many of those cases are juvenile, as Fritz Fremgen, state's attorney, alluded to. And they're going to be outside the realm of what the media can cover. That's closed court, and it basically gives the courts a chance to deal with that child without doing it in the public eye. And so if there are cases like that, they're not something that the media or the general public has knowledge of.
Now, are there any cases that have been, not just including juveniles, but, you know, adults?
Not that I'm aware of, although, again, Mr. Fremgen talked about some cases involving some child pornography in Jamestown, things like that. We're not immune from it because we're a small town. It does happen in our area, and it's just a sign of our times, I guess we'll say.
Now, we discussed a little earlier some state laws the North Dakota passed a couple of years ago regarding sexting, but has Jamestown, the city, or Stutsman County addressed this issue at all, maybe on a local level with some ordinances?
I don't believe there's any ordinances. I think their task would be to simply enforce the state laws. I don't know as there would be a need for a local ordinance on these type of things. You've got the state law in place. City can only pass ordinances that deal with things up to a misdemeanor. So I'm not sure that they would have the authority to deal with these things. Their task is just to enforce what the state is putting on their books.
Now, we talked a little bit with Fritz about the story in the New York Times involving the girl out in Washington who forwarded the photo to her former boyfriend, and her former friend got it, and things got out of hand. This might be kind of an obvious question, but what are some things going forward that students or parents can make sure that this doesn't happen?
Kids are not real good at looking at the downside of their acts. What is going to be the repercussions in the future? That's how a lot of bad decisions ultimately get made, because they don't think about the repercussions. That's where we get back to the first thing we talked about. It's the parents that have to be involved in these things. Parents are a lot better at saying, you know, this is going to haunt you for the rest of your life, than a 16-year-old saying, this is a lot of fun right now.
Right. Now, looking at that from a 16-year-old's perspective,
oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, but maybe sometimes they need that protection because they don't know what they're doing to themselves. Do you think that's necessary?
It's necessary, and it should be the responsibility of the parents. It should be the responsibility of the schools to reinforce those things, but it really has to start with the parents and be all through the whole system. That, yes, this is the wrong thing to do, even though you think it's a great time now, this is wrong.
Now, what are some things, I mean, we talked a lot about education, but what are some specific things people can say? Mr. Musland talked a little bit about being involved and maybe working it out of the kids or something, but what are some things parents can do?
Well, every time the child is busy, or anybody is busy, there's less chance for the mischief to happen, and he made valid points. Farm kids of 30 years ago were too busy hauling bales to get into that kind of trouble. Sports are a great thing, school activities, church, any of those things can serve as a way to occupy time and build some character.
Now, Ms. Deegan works with parents and educating them. What would you say the effect of her efforts and maybe her organization's efforts have had in Jamestown?
It's very important to get the parents involved and give them the tools. Because a lot of parents don't know what they have to do with their child or don't know how to go about doing it. And I'm kind of surmising that from things I've heard because I'm not a parent. But that's a big important step. Get the parents the skills and the knowledge and the desire, I guess, to take that step, to be that part of the child's life.
Now, we've talked a lot about education, but if you could sum up quickly and maybe one big point, what is one big thing that maybe someone out in our audience should take from tonight's discussion?
If you're a parent, be involved in your kid's life. That's the most important thing out there.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much, Keith, for joining us again.
Pleasure
We always
to be
appreciate your help and coming on the program. And to our audience, thank you for joining us for this edition of Knightwatch. And I'd like to invite you to join us again next month for another edition of Knightwatch when we take a look at books on the move. Is there a new library in Jamestown's future? Until then, I'm Matthew Nies. Good night, Jamestown.